There are many things to love when it comes to Songs of War. Everything comes together to make an incredible movie, especially one that's free to watch on YouTube. However, one thing in the original script for the later seasons that's not great is the writing. I can count the number of well-written characters on one hand, so today, we'll focus on 3 characters who deserved far more depth than they got. The Tidesinger did nothing important post-Great War, Zulius died immediately, and Herobrine is fundamentally flawed for so many reasons. This is my second rewriting video, so if you haven't seen the first one or watched Songs of War by squaredmedia, some things might not make much sense. Now is also a good time to clarify that our small team has a ton of interwoven storylines figured out for our fan rewrite. Everything is connected, and the other video may have had some spoiler blocks. Once again, shout out to JesusAlex and GetScribbled, who are the behind-the-scenes masterminds for all this. I'd also like to shout out TheSnakeAnimator, who made the thumbnail, and LukusKaltaris. They both made a few special renders for this rewrite, so thank you guys for helping out. Alright, these videos always end up a lot longer than I anticipate, and we have a lot to cover. So let's get straight into our rewrite, starting from the beginning of Season 2. In the days of the champions, long before tragedy befell the 4 clans, our legend begins in a humble fishing town, where mighty waves crash and golden lights illuminate the shores. Among the Nestor Sardoni who dwelled happily here, 2 were expecting a son. Gloom had no place in their home, yet their spark of joy was snuffed out. The birth of their child caused the death of the mother, leaving behind merely the father and his only newborn son. The lone father buried himself in grief, and in his sorrow he could no longer bear to look his son in the eyes, the very child who stole the life of his mother. The Nestoris cared not for his child, as every time he so much as glanced in the boy's direction, he was reminded of what he had become and who was lost. The markings before him were a spitting image of his own. The father, however, abided by the mother's final wish to give the boy a name of nobility and purity, meaning a bringer of hope. Achillean Nestoris. The battle at Mount Velgrin was a turning point in Ardonia's history, and in this rewrite, as you could tell from the title, it would end a bit differently than the script. Zulius doesn't die. Galadar and Hadeon double-team Deathsinger so their friend can escape, so this time around, Zulius lives. After he escapes, he's met by none other than the Tidesinger himself. Achillean stepped through the portal not long after the Deathsinger, and he and Zulius escaped the mountains together. Now that Zulius is an actual relevant character, we have to expand on his already existing characteristics. When he's introduced, Zulius is the only one who's outraged at the Voltaris attacks, and the first to volunteer to hunt them down. He regrets ignoring Thalius, and the death of the old champion shaped Zulius' worldview. He feels like he needs to be the next Thalius, and takes up the responsibilities left behind by the champion. He's guilt-driven, and knows he's partially responsible for the destruction of the villages, and now the deaths of his companions. Had he listened to Thalius the first time, perhaps all these tragedies wouldn't have happened, and now he's the one who bears the devastating knowledge that Thalius was right. He feels like he must make amends for his arrogance and complacency by helping the Tidesinger stop the Deathsinger and prevent him from destroying the world his friends gave their lives to protect. Okay, something that always bugged me was how both singers time-traveled into the future, but that never really came up again and wasn't important at all. To fix this, Achillean struggles to adjust to Ardonia after the Great War, and with redstone technology on the rise and civil wars across the kingdoms, there would be a lot for him to learn. Together, Zulius and Achillean travel to the clans to persuade them to take action in this dire situation. Their plan fails because Zulius rambles incoherently about Thalius being right and Deathsinger's return. And the Tidesinger isn't tide-singing. On the contrary, he's completely disoriented, showing no signs of being a competent leader. Instead of rallying to fight, the masters locked down their borders like cowards. No one else in the provinces knew of the singer's survival, and everyone in that room swore to secrecy to keep it that way. Zulius and Achillean are on their own, so they try to find the Voltaris and get the Tidesinger adjusted to living 150 years outside of his own time. After a few months, Achillean is much better adjusted, and he and Zulius have become pretty good friends. A messenger bird tells them to travel to Ataraxia one day, and there they meet Gallius, who gives Achillean his songs and urges them to get to the vault as the Voltaris have been spotted there. They hastily leave the city with one of Gallius' students, Val, and make it to the vault before it's too late. Senn and Rhea have already stupidly gone to confront Deathsinger and Tygren on the bridge, and all the other knights of Ardonia are on the mainland. They were losing the fight, and after a quick moment of analyzing the situation, Tidesinger took action. He drops from the sky, landing in front of Senn and Rhea with the Jumpy Boy song, and Zulius arrives normally from the pathway. So, you know how in the Senn and Rhea video I said, other knights swoop in and save them? Yeah, it was Achillean and Zulius. They're the only reason the knights get away with the prime song. Zulius helps Senn and Rhea up and ushers them off the bridge, and Val goes to the other knights to help them. Tygren and Ingressus stare in shock at the Tidesinger, alive, having seemingly spawned out of nowhere like a guardian angel to protect the knights. Tidesinger being alive didn't affect much in the original script, so having his presence drastically change the trajectory of this fight makes his impact far greater. Tidesinger has to shape the plot and influence characters just as much as Ingressus does. He's supposed to be the Deathsinger's equal, so fixing the weak framing the script had of him is crucial. Tygren, however, interrupts the silent moment by firing his agrosphere, and he and Zulius have a stare down before engaging in a rematch. Neither of the singers can get a word in through all the fighting, and Achillean duels the Deathsinger to take back the Seporium Prime. Deathsinger's now the one playing defense to keep the Prime for himself, and Tidesinger is on offense. But this wouldn't be a very fun Tidesinger-Deathsinger fight if it was limited to just this small bridge, right? This is where their songs come in handy. Deathsinger now has the Saporochesis from the fight at Mount Velgrin, and to combat Achillean's Jumpy Boy song, we're giving him a new mobilium that we've named Mobiliswing. Imagine a mix of Spider-Man swinging and some aspects of the omnidirectional gear from Attack on Titan, and that's basically how it works. The other new song we're giving Deathsinger is called Protoguard, and that song summons 2 small arm shields for the user, and when combined, they create one bigger, more powerful shield. It would work well in tandem with the flying gear, since it has an aerodynamic shape, and it would look cool too. Now their fight is more equal, and they can duke it out not just on the bridge, but in the sky and underneath it, and make this set feel grander since there wasn't a whole lot to work with originally. Tygren and Zulius fight on the bridge while the singers are zipping all over the place, and Zulius sees an opening and fires Aggro Vortex at Deathsinger. Through this quick distraction, the Tidesinger's speed lets him strike the Deathsinger so hard he hits him straight through the roof of the vault. Ingressus lets go of the Prime and it was sitting on the roof, so the Tidesinger seized the opportunity and took it. The rebels are winning the fight, and Tygren is now almost surrounded. Ingressus knows they're outnumbered, so he uses Saporochesis to forcefully lift Tygren out of there, further humiliating him, but saving his life. Being dragged out of a fight like a child would definitely contribute to Tygren's resentment of Ingressus, but we're not here to talk about Tygren. The Knights of Ardonia celebrate their victory, and they let the Tidesinger take leadership of the group. In the script, Achillean did a lot of meandering about, not doing anything important until his last fight. This time around, he's an active force in the plot, making decisions that impact the story's direction and actually influencing other characters since, after all, he's the legendary Tidesinger and absolutely deserves to live up to that title. Achillean rallies everyone to head to Crown Peak to retrieve the next Prime Song, and Zulius is named Achillean's second in command. With 2 experienced warriors at their side, the Knights are now a genuine threat to the Deathsinger and his plans. The Knights camp out for the night, and all 5 Ardoni clans have a representative here, even though Senn is clanless right now, but we'll ignore that. Each clan has a distinct culture, so seeing them all mesh and interact here would be really cool. 2 important things happen in this scene. Achillean begins acting as the moral compass for the Knights, namely the 2 that are hellbent on revenge, so he decides that he must keep them from going down a dark path like Ingressus did. The other important thing is the start of slight disagreements between Zulius and Achillean on how to deal with the Voltaris. Zulius, like Thalius, wants the Deathsinger dead. He wants the job done as soon as possible, and sees all Voltaris as obstacles to overcome. He believes all Voltaris are evil, especially the Deathsinger, after killing his friends. Meanwhile, Achillean has moral qualms about killing Ingressus, but he can't let the others know that. The Tidesinger is the only one who can defeat the Deathsinger, yet Achillean avoids the topic at any cost. Zulius knows Achillean better than anyone else here, so he would be the only one comfortable enough to challenge and question his morals, something that never really happened before. Zulius would also shift the dynamic of the Knights of Ardonia, as he would strategically organize the resistance and make it less like a ragtag club of teenagers. Another dynamic that would be introduced is the Zulius and Hubris relationship. Zulius offered Hubris to join the assault on Mount Velgrin in Season 1, but he refused, saying they needed a whole army. Zulius ignored Hubris' warning, even though he turned out to be right. Hubris would be annoyed at Zulius' sudden shift in attitude towards the bigger picture, and Zulius would be annoyed at Hubris' childish "I told you so" attitude. And they would quarrel quite a bit in the background. Achillean learns more about Rhea and Hubris, and he notices both of their markings are the same ones as 2 old champions. Season 1 showed someone with Hubris' exact markings in the tournament, so him being descended from one, like Rhea, doesn't seem too far-fetched. The Tidesinger mentors them both, mainly to lift Rhea up and to stop Hubris' overbearing ego from weighing everyone down. Achillean goes to talk with them and acts like any normal Ardoni as opposed to the legendary Tidesinger. Seeing him be so down-to-earth was a bit of a shock. For all they know, he's this grand legend with 0 weaknesses. Everyone there sees Achillean as an object rather than a person, not realizing he has fears and doubts just like the rest of them. After inquiring about who they were, Achillean tells them more about his origins as a fisher in Nestoria, coming from practically nothing. His father never cared for him, and his mother died before Achillean could even meet her, and Master Aegis helped raise him since his real father was too resentful and unfit to be a parent. Achillean left off there, telling them nothing more. A couple days later, the knights walk to the gates of Crown Peak, and they see dragons in the sky and nether forces starting to invade the city. The Tidesinger knew there wouldn't be another opening, so he quickly got Senn and they snuck into Crown Peak to get the Mobilium Prime. Zulius stayed at the city gates and led the evacuation, as he saw Rhea running into the city and Hubris following her. Zulius yelled at them to come back, but neither of the teenagers listened, so he decided to just stay put and keep helping the innocents escape. Senn and Achillean are too late, as the Deathsinger already has the Mobilium Prime song. This fight is mostly the same. The only thing we added in the last rewrite video was Senn's insult, unknowingly doing psychic damage to the Deathsinger and by extension, the Tidesinger. They learn of Deathsinger's renewed alliance with the Nether, and Achillean knows their situation is about to become far worse. The Second Great War is on the verge of starting, and the knights have been caught at the center of the first onslaught. Achillean and Senn are rescued by Abigail, but they leave without the Prime song they came for. The knights regroup at the edge of the city, and Zulius scolds Rhea and Hubris for their stupid little stunt, but he's glad they're alive. The Nether has begun their total invasion of Ardonia. However, an important detail changes here in this rewrite. Pythus doesn't immediately clash with the Necromancers in the west this time around. Instead, he makes an agreement with the Necrolord, so now all 3 villain factions are united. We'll expand on the details of this some other time, but the point is, the knights have to fight another major foe, one that the Tidesinger has never faced before and will have to adapt in unique ways to overcome this challenge. Eventually, the knights all reconvene at Ataraxia, where they safekeep the Saporium Prime. When the topic of the Deathsinger arises, Zulius and Achillean's polar opposite views cause them to argue a little bit, but the Tidesinger quickly changes the subject to tell the others of an ally who may answer their call for help. Achillean gathers a small team to go summon his friend, and a few knights accompany him to the northern part of the heart of Ardonia's valley. Achillean locates something and removes the overgrown leaves and moss from it, revealing a long-abandoned shrine made of gold, netherrack, and redstone. After lighting the redstone torches, Achillean ignites the Shire with an aggro beam, and they wait, and wait, and wait for something, anything to happen. As the hours pass, Rhea talks with Achillean, and he continues inspiring her and promises to train her so she will not lose her composure in battle. Achillean also helps her see the errors of her ways and to keep her revenge-seeking attitude at bay. Of all people, Achillean should be the one who's full of hatred towards the Voltaris, Ingressus, and even towards his biological father, but he knew better. Continuing the cycle of hatred accomplished nothing, and when Rhea tells him what she lost to the Voltaris, he admits that he lost his closest brother to the Deathsinger. Much later that night, something extraordinary happens, as the heart of Ardonia begins to shine brighter and brighter, waking up the knights when suddenly a thunderclap booms and the entire valley shakes as the call is answered. They all back away in fear, seeing 2 glowing white eyes in the black smoke, but not the Tidesinger. They recognize the figure as he, or the ghost of Ardonia, or the apparition, but we the audience know him as Herobrine. I'm fairly certain the original writers included Herobrine just to hook the little kids and nostalgia bait Minecraft veterans into watching the show. And given everyone's initial reaction to his teaser in the prologue, it worked very well. However, his original purpose was just that, fan service. He never had a real reason to exist here beyond recognizability, so we're going to fix that and give Herobrine a clear purpose within the narrative. He's fundamentally different from almost every other character because he's from an outside source, and we had to find a justification for that. The script touched on Herobrine crossing different dimensions and his fragile mortality, and we leaned heavily into these more abstract ideas. In our rewrite, Herobrine has an unnatural and mysterious existence. He's above space-time, and exists outside of the dimensions as a whole. Herobrine's true form is purely conceptual and beyond the common understanding of both nature and magic. Basically, he's 5-dimensional, but such a thing is simply referred to as a higher realm. To interact with Ardonia in the physical realms, he has to use a vessel. If a mortal saw his true form, their brain would be fried. The vessel he uses would be the form we know him as, the Steve skin with glowing white eyes. In his physical form, Herobrine only has a fraction of his power, and his stamina is incredibly weak since whenever we see him, it's only his lesser, humanoid counterpart. The longer he stays in Ardonia, the more mortal his vessel becomes. So theoretically, it could die the same as any of us if he didn't return to his own dimension to recharge. Herobrine fears dying in his mortal form, and thus fears permanently losing his vessel. He intervened in both great wars because they brought great unbalance, not just to the physical realms, but the higher realms as well. He's an anti-hero in Songs of War, cloaked in black when he first appears, and seemingly uses his power in questionable ways. However, it's to keep the balance and prevent the higher dimensions from shattering, since their foundation is in the lower, physical dimensions. If any of the realms collapse, all of them do, and that's what he's here to stop. Herobrine fights far more actively in the Second Great War because things are worse this time around. King Pythus is ruling most of Ardonia with an iron fist. The Voltaris and Necromancers are working with the Nether for a triple-threat villain alliance, and the new Ender Knights are not at all prepared for what they've been chosen to do. Few mortals dare even speak Herobrine's name, commonly referring to him as just he. They say he's a creature who never blinks nor casts any shadow. Others say if you stare at his white eyes for too long, you'll get a glimpse of his true form and go mad. For that reason, all mortals instinctively avoid eye contact with him. All except for one. The Tidesinger. The only person in Ardonia who knows a decent amount about Herobrine is Achillean. The others have no idea what his intentions are or how powerful he really is. They only know the plethora of myths and stories surrounding him, portraying him as either a benevolent ally or painting him as a heartless monster beyond the stars. Some say he's responsible for the Shrouded Islands becoming nothing but stony wastelands. Others say he battled an evil shadow deity of similar nature as him, and few paranoids claim that he sunk half the continent and created the Uncharted Islands as a result. Regardless of the veracity of said legends, Herobrine has acquired fame and gained plenty of epithets throughout Ardonia's history, including the Phantom, the Ghost of Ardonia, the Lord of Lightning, the Celestial, the Apparition, and more. Now, Herobrine has some actual background surrounding him, and his menacing presence is more justified. His mythical powers also extend beyond basic lightning and thunder stuff. Herobrine would get more of his abilities from SquaredMedia's Alex and Steve series, which includes flight, telekinesis, teleportation, and shockwaves. He'd also be able to manipulate energy and matter, and can see all possible future outcomes. He can travel through higher dimensions, which also means he can manipulate beacon travel as well. Despite all these buffs, his powers in Ardonia are limited compared to his highest form. He's still insanely strong and has abilities no one can understand, but someone like Tidesinger could still defeat him in combat in the physical realm. Herobrine's purpose in the plot is to uphold the balance between the realms, and his actions will have a major influence on the fate of all Ardonia. Now, he has a reason to be in Songs of War besides fan service. He also brings a whole nother element of complexity to the lore and magic that extends the world far beyond what the main characters can see. All this information would be shown throughout Season 3, but for now, we can get back to what actually happens once Herobrine joins the party. I thought it would be easier to give him an entire section since this stuff is so abstract compared to the rest of this video. So, thank you for listening to my Herobrine TED Talk. Let's get back to Season 3. Tidesinger, Hubris, and Rhea traveled to the clans once more to convince them to join the war effort. This time, Achillean is confident and he acts much more like the Tidesinger, and delivers a powerful speech that finally convinces the masters to join the fray. Tidesinger starts tide-singing again, and just as Zulius and a few other knights return to Ataraxia from a quick mission, they see Achillean with the vast force of Ardoni warriors, some on foot while others ride horses, the most strength the modern Ardoni clans have to offer. Achillean's been training Rhea and Hubris, while also doing extensive undercover operations thanks to Gallius's vast networking, and Season 3 is when his plans begin coming into fruition. Since we're talking about the Tidesinger, we're gonna go a bit more in-depth for some of our rewritten battles. He leads most of these, and even impacts the ones he's not there for, so it's only fair we get to talk about him actually doing cool stuff. So, here's a brief timeline of all the relevant battles and campaigns between seasons. First, the Siege of Meridian, where the people held back the Nether's original attack with the sacrifices of Sidonia's captain of the guard and his elite troops on the backs of rhinos. Many able-bodied citizens stayed to fight while the young and old were evacuated to the Trinity Islands. The Nether eventually pushed through the kingdom and all the Sidonian council members were killed except for Hassan. But the citizens and soldiers continued fighting tooth and nail for every street and every house, all the way until Season 3. Second, the Carthan campaign. It's what we've called the Nether's futile attempts to conquer the kingdom, but thanks to Carthan's separation from the Union, they've stayed strong and resisted the invasion. Third, the fall of Northwind. The captain of Northwind was on a mission at Frostburn when he got news of the Nether's invasion and decided to mount the resistance from the small fishing town. Fourth, the Felden resistance. While the Nether and Necromancers spread throughout Felden, Lucan and Nika organized their own resistance, recruiting people like Marcus and Eddie for it. Together, their resistance is no more than a group of 30 people, yet they've been waging a guerrilla warfare against the Nether, and the real trump card for their group came with a Nether Star and an upcoming date for a plan set in motion by the Knights of Ardonia. During their preparations for the upcoming battle, Zulius and Achillean disagree about the Deathsinger, and Zulius inquires why Achillean refused to simply kill him to end all the bloodshed. In between seasons 2 and 3, the tensions between them regarding this subject has erupted. The Tidesinger's greatest weakness was his reluctance to give up on Ingressus and kill the Deathsinger. Achillean's moral compass would either destroy any hopes of them winning the war, or it would be destroyed in the war. Zulius can't understand Achillean's hesitations, and Gallius tries to stop their bickering. Even through their small dispute, the Tidesinger is giving Gallius and Zulius vague hints about his plans for the resistance after the next battle, but they get ignored in the heat of the moment. Later that night, Gallius asks Achillean privately what it is he's fighting for, but Achillean doesn't give him a straight answer. Despite Gallius' attempts, Achillean and Zulius part ways on negative terms for the battle. The day of the attack is at hand, and the Tidesinger leads the allied forces in a charge towards the enemy troops besieging Meridian, and the remaining Sidonians use their last war elephant to break through the Nether's disorganized lines from their front, and the few surviving Rhino Riders follow behind. As the Ender Dragons engage the withers and blazes in the sky, an all-out fight begins. Achillean leaves leadership of the allied forces to Zulius, but right before he leaves, he mentions something about the Necromancers to Zulius, but it kinda goes over his head at first. Tidesinger then charges headfirst with a platoon of the Alliance's best soldiers spearheading deeper into enemy lines, and he meets with Hassan to ask him to reignite the beacon. Hassan calls Tidesinger mad, yet he remains adamant, so he relents and allows the Tidesinger to warp to Flora. In Felden, Lucan and Nika's resistance gets into position, and Lucan gives the signal with a firework, and the fight commences. Eddie's with Marcus as he finishes a drink, and Marcus ignites a bomb to distract the enemy, and Nika jumps down and lights the beacon. Just as the Nether and Necromancers begin to surround the resistance, the Tidesinger's elite platoon arrives, and the battle of the two beacons officially begins. The Meridian and Flora fights happen simultaneously, and this is all thanks to the Tidesinger's plan in using the beacons against the Nether. Tidesinger is the real game changer in Flora, as he alone is able to hold back much of the enemy forces. However, Nether reinforcements and a few of Tygren's extremists beam in, and Tidesinger seizes the opportunity and runs towards the beacon. Within the warp, Achillean comes across the massive reinforcement army, and he activates his Aggressium song, firing it all around the beacon's subdimensional walls like a tornado. While this barely kills any skeletons, his signal worked, and a stone sword appears from one of the walls. The sword slices down and creates a cut in the warp wall, and two hands appear and forces the warp wall open, revealing Herobrine. He looks at the horrified Nether forces in Voltaris kinda like this.
Here's Johnny!
He smiles at them and jumps into the warp, killing them all. Achillean uses his mobilium to fight against the beacon's warp pull and remain within it to help Herobrine deal with the enemy. However, Achillean and Herobrine only dealt with the reinforcements heading towards Flora. The enemies beaming to Meridian arrive without any issues, and Tygren and the Angel of Death beacon in. After finishing off the Flora reinforcements, Herobrine teleports to Meridian, and Achillean returns to Flora to keep up the fight for as long as possible. Meanwhile, Zulius sees Tygren pinning Senn and Rhea down after beating them in a fight. Just as he's about to run them through with Thalius' sword, Zulius' aggro vortex flies in, and Tygren narrowly avoids it. So, you remember in the last video when I said other notable resistance members swoop in and save them? Yep, it was Zulius. Again. This man is their saving grace because he shields Senn and Rhea from Tygren for the second time. Tygren and Zulius engage in a ferocious fight, and they are extremely evenly matched. Thanks to Zulius surviving the Velgren battle, he and Tygren can have a pretty interesting parallel. They are mirrors of each other in a way. Both are the best warriors of their own time, and they were both second in command on their respective sides. Tygren rebelled against his leader after a disagreement, but Zulius stayed loyal despite the arguments he and Achillean had. The Ardoni fire their songs at each other, and Zulius' donut song absorbs Tygren's agrosphere and sends the energy of both songs back at Tygren, knocking him down. Then, Zulius finally manages to uppercut Tygren into a pool of lava. But, at the last second, he uses the teleport song and lands in the ocean instead, narrowly avoiding the same death as his original counterpart. Tygren is too weak to even swim, so he lets the currents take him. Zulius also collapses to the floor from exhaustion, so Tygren gets away and escapes alive. Zulius passes out after having drained all his energy, and Senn and Rhea take him somewhere safe. On the other side of the city, Herobrine is confronting the Angel of Death, taunting the flying abomination and daring it to attack him. He dodges every attack effortlessly, without even drawing his sword. He smiles and flies up into the air to fight the angel, and the entire time, Herobrine just toys with this dumb flying rat. The angel has a fit of rage and rushes at a building where civilians are hiding, but he teleports in front and stops him. Herobrine throws him into the sky and slices his wings multiple times, but he isn't done punishing this beast just yet. As the angel flies away, he uses telekinesis to straight up rip an empty tower from its foundation and throws it at the angel like a javelin. After that blow, the Angel of Death retreats, running away limply, being too injured to even fly. The other Nether forces are swarmed and overpowered by the Resistance. The Knights team up with the Magnites from Carthan that just arrived from the north, and they break the enemy's retreat. The Nether forces are surrounded and completely destroyed. The Alliance has successfully retaken Meridian. In Philora, Achillean comes face to face with the Necrolord, a confrontation between the Ardoni who forsook songs and the Ardoni who was beloved by songs. Necrolord insults Achillean's blind naivete and trust in his allies by asking him, "Tell me, Tidesinger, how can a legend such as yourself call themselves a hero if you are too blind to see the truth? Your alliance is frail, made up of outcasts and outlaws, so I ask you this. How far do you think that oblivious hope of yours will drive you in this war ignited by hatred?" And the Tidesinger actually says a witty comment back that plants a seed of mistrust in the Necrolord's mind. "Perhaps you are right, yet my choices are far overshadowed by your own. You, an old, delusional Ardoni, choosing the dead over your own living people? You fight beside schemers and kinslayers, yet heel like a dog to your foolish masters. What do you think happens when the use you have for them runs out?" However, the enemy begins to surround Achillean, and Scorch appears out of nowhere and flanks him while he's fighting the Necrolord. Tidesinger's resolve still doesn't break, and he is ready to fight them both, until he sees the Resistance being surrounded as well. He then chooses to save the lives of his soldiers over continuing the fight, and runs off to meet with Lucan and Nika and tells them to order a retreat. They're both distraught, yet the Tidesinger reassures them that he has a plan and that his platoon would stay in Philora to help, and some other knights would soon join them as well. Lucan and Nika oblige and begin the retreat, and Achillean bids his elite platoon farewell and hurries to the beacon, warping back to Meridian before the enemy forces can take him down. Only a couple soldiers on the Philora front died thanks to the Tidesinger's efforts. If not for him, Felden would have had to deal with the Necromancers and the Nether with no outside help. Despite not winning the battle on the Philora side, it was not a worthless endeavor. Achillean's involvement and active leadership is key to the rebellion's success, something the original script severely lacked. The moment Achillean arrives back in Meridian, he takes out the Nether Star and finds Hassan, giving him hope in spite of the loss at Philora. He said everyone there was ready to continue the fight another day, and when Hassan pressed for a less ambiguous answer, Achillean simply declared the Battle of the Two Beacons a victory for the rebels. Cheers erupt from the Sidonian and Carthan soldiers after winning a significant victory, and more importantly, having finally made amends between the two warring kingdoms and fighting alongside each other. Ever since the war began, Tidesinger had deemed the Necromancers the wild card of the Triple Threat Villain Alliance, so he sent Zulius and Masani to help the Felden rebels end the Necromancers' dominion in the west. Achillean and Zulius have one final conversation at the city docks, discussing the Deathsinger and the war before they part. Without galleys there to mediate the situation, it escalates and the two start yelling at each other, and Zulius finally asks Achillean, "How far are you willing to fall for this foolish stubbornness of yours?" Zulius soon turns around and boards a boat with Masani without looking back, sailing off to Felden to infiltrate the kingdom. With remorse, the Tidesinger watches his friend sail away, but he pushes his conflict aside and gathers the remaining knights at Meridian to fly off on Thunderdome to find the Protesium Prime. They arrive at Ataraxia a few days later, only to find it destroyed. Rhea and the survivors tell Achillean the Deathsinger attacked the city and reclaimed the Saporium Prime. Achillean decides the next best move is to find the final Prime Song before Ingressus, so the knights march up north to obtain it. They take a small detour and stop at Nestoria one night before continuing their journey, and Achillean has a chance to talk with Master Aurelius privately. They both know of Achillean's past, how he considered the Deathsinger a brother, and Achillean's unfortunate origins, even before Ingressus was around. Master Aegus saved Achillean as a newborn. He watched as Achillean's father brought his son to the ocean early one morning and nearly let him drown in the waves in his grief over the loss of his wife, wanting to end who he deemed responsible for the tragedy. Aurelius questioned the Tidesinger's willingness to kill Ingressus, asking if winning the war would truly bring back the peace he once had. Aurelius gets a more honest answer since he was the one person who did know about their former friendship. The old master convinces Achillean to wield the Prime Songs once and for all against Ingressus, and after linking himself to the Protesium Prime in Nestoria, he and the others leave swiftly the next morning. On their way up north, they pass a few half-buried shrines from an aeon ruled by the Ardoni, but lost to time. It's just a fun little background detail that adds to the lore and would look cool in traveling scenes. The knights approach Frostburn and meet with Roman, the captain of Northwind. Roman is from Songs of War What If. It's not even out yet, but shout out to Defal. We liked the name, so we went with it. We're also expanding Songs of War's animal kingdom with this one. Frostburn has 5 mammoths, and if you were paying attention earlier, you'd know the Sidonians ride rhinos and elephants into battle, which we thought was cool too. Achillean, Grimm, and Rhea get the last prime at Gale Point, and they pass by one last frozen shrine with 2 missing pillars. The Glacian gives Achillean the prime song, but with the state of the shrine outside, he can't actually use it. Tidesinger has one final conversation about his morality here, and the Glacian's wisdom gives Achillean a new insight into his personal conflict with Ingressus. He asks the Tidesinger one simple question. Tell me, Achillean, have you truly done all you could? Or is there a reason you refrain from doing so? Which really leaves him thinking. When they return to Frostburn, a scout frantically rushes in with horrible news. A nether army was coming right towards them using the snowstorm as cover, and worst of all, the Deathsinger is leading them. They're mere minutes away from an unexpected battle, and Captain Roman ushers the knights to leave with the Prime as soon as they can. Tidesinger refuses to abandon Frostburn, so he takes command and helps organize their small resistance, and Rhea asks why he isn't just giving the Prime Song to Val, or getting himself on the back of a dragon and flying away with it. Achillean knew the Deathsinger had the Mobilium Prime, and with Withers at his command, he would do anything to catch up and claim the Aggressium Prime. Running away was useless. Instead, he decides to put just his own life in peril by finally confronting the Deathsinger and doing what everyone has been begging him to. Rhea protests, but Achillean reassures her with a hand on her shoulder and tells her she's in charge for the meantime. The Tidesinger used the Aggressium Prime as bait to lure the Deathsinger away from the town. The fighting begins, and the two singers oppose each other for the last time. Achillean refuses to hand over the Prime, firing an aggro beam right in the Deathsinger's face, but he dodges it, and their duel commences. Achillean with only 1 Prime is equal to, if not slightly superior to Ingressus' power with 2 Prime Songs, and they fight in the snowy plains in the middle of the storm, almost alienated from the rest of the conflict. Just when everything seems to be going well, a dark figure zooms in and tackles Val away from the main fight. The Angel of Death has arrived at Frostburn with unexpected nether reinforcements, all accompanied by one Natharan who would drastically alter the tone of this battle and make it far more cataclysmic, King Pythis himself. Pythis was annoyed by Frostburn's continued resistance, and after the loss at Meridian, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He sees flashing lights in the distance and realizes Deathsinger's fighting Tidesinger, alone. Pythis joins their fight, and he and the Deathsinger give each other a quick nod of acknowledgement as they team up on the Tidesinger. Achillean makes extremely heavy use of the Protesium Prime to fend them off. However, it was only a matter of time before Achillean exhausted himself and would end up exposed. Just when all seemed lost, another major player joined their fight. Lightning bolts all across the skies of Northwind interrupted the violent snowstorm, and a dark shadow zapped in front of the Tidesinger. Herobrine spawned in and fought alongside Achillean, and he sent Pythis flying all the way back to Frostburn. He crashed through a few buildings, but Pythis walked out completely unscathed. The Phantom taunts Pythis similarly to his infamous taunt to Steve, and uses his dimension-bending abilities to deter Pythis. But this lunatic is enjoying his time, laughing at the ghost's attempts. The two singers are still fighting over the Aggressium Prime like a game of keep-away. Achillean was still conflicted about killing Ingressus, even when literally everything was giving him signs it was for the best. Then, they switched opponents briefly. Tidesinger was fighting Pythis, and Herobrine was fighting Deathsinger. Herobrine tries staring at Ingressus as an attack, but unlike many others before him, he doesn't go insane from looking at his eyes and seeing past the physical dimensions. The Primes still have an extremely strong grasp on Ingressus, and they're not going to relent so easily, not even to a myth like Herobrine. He tries forcing Ingressus into other realms to gain an advantage, but the Deathsinger is strong enough to propel them right back into Ardonia before they fully leave. The 4 combatants converge once again, and in a moment of confusion, Herobrine grabs the Aggressium Prime and quickly flies up, attempting to teleport back to his dimension with the Prime. The Deathsinger catches him mid-teleportation with the Saporochesis, and with the help of a Mobila Wing Song, he anchors himself to the ground while holding on to the ghost that stole his coveted prize. Herobrine is frozen in the middle of hopping between dimensions, and his physical form blinds the others as it looks like he's made of pure light. Achillean jumps onto the Deathsinger's back and begins choking him with the staff, trying to get Ingressus to let go of his grip on Herobrine. As the three are in a stalemate, the Nether King very unsubtly runs up and tries to take out both singers with one quick swing of his axe while they're distracted. The Deathsinger notices though, and finally brings down Herobrine, who crashes down and collides with Pythis on the ground. Ingressus composes himself and sees the Aggressian Prime had flown off in the explosion, and tries to claim it. The two singers engage in a struggle for the final time, and in a moment of breathing, Achillean catches a glimpse of the Deathsinger's eyes, yet sees nothing but anger without a single trace of his brother. He's even throwing Voltar around in this fight, far too desperate to get this prime, and he's seemingly willing to sacrifice everything for it. Achillean's hope in believing there was some part of Ingressus left wavers, now believing maybe the fury of the primes really is all that remains. He prepares to dodge the Deathsinger's attack, but in that quick moment, he reminisces of all the conversations and arguments he had regarding his beliefs. Yet one thing resonated in his head more than the others. The question the Glacian asked. In that instant of pure rage, the Deathsinger does something previously thought impossible. He accidentally activates a Mobiliburst and his Agroblast at the same time, and Achillean had his answer to the question, so he decides to take a gamble. One that could determine the fate of the Voltaris and the war. Achillean deactivates his song mid-charge, drops his staff, and lands on the ground, leaving himself wide open. When the Deathsinger notices, it's far too late. The Nestoris looks up at him, smiling slightly, and lets Ingressus attack him without defending himself. The Deathsinger lands a devastating blow to Tidesinger's chest, and Ingressus spins around to continue fighting as if nothing happened. He looks at Achillean, who's stumbling while holding a hand to his chest, and Ingressus realizes this was no trick. Herobrine and Pythis run up to the explosion and see the Tidesinger clutching his chest, injured. Herobrine realized the Tidesinger just made the extremely risky gamble of allowing the Deathsinger to kill him. He knew the probability of Achillean sacrificing his life was very high, yet he couldn't help but be disappointed that Ardonia's greatest leader let himself be overcome by emotions and allowed his enemy to destroy him. Herobrine doesn't understand emotions like mortals do, so he can't comprehend being compelled by them enough to pull a stunt like that. In that split second, all those thoughts race through Herobrine's mind. Pythis looks back at him while he stands there and instantly swings his axe at him. Herobrine merely looks back at the Nether King with a mix of frustration and disappointment and just teleports away before he can get hit. Pythis turns around and grins, watching Achillean collapse to his knees before heading back to Frostburn to capture the town. The resistance is overwhelmed by the Nether, and they're losing a ton of soldiers. The knights retreat, and after 2 years of fighting, Frostburn has finally fallen. Captain Roman charged into the fray atop his mammoth to buy the knights time to escape, yet both him and his mount are killed by Pythis, and the knights see the Tidesinger's near-lifeless body, knowing the battle was a major loss. Tidesinger's death plays out a bit different than the original, though. He doesn't die the second he flops onto the floor, and Achillean has real last words when he's wounded. This would only be revealed in Season 3, Episode 10, in the flashback. I wrote out some dialogue and a quick excerpt from the rewritten Tidesinger's death a while ago, so I'll read it for you guys. The Deathsinger stared in shock with wide eyes as the Tidesinger held a hand to his chest and fell to his knees. He didn't even notice the Aggressian Prime laying on the ground beside his wounded brother. Achillean began to fall backwards, and the Deathsinger swiftly teleported to the Tidesinger as he fell, catching him before his back touched the snow and held the dying Nestoris in his arms. The Deathsinger's breathing became slightly more panicked as Achillean's markings flickered. Why didn't you? He was interrupted by Achillean's weakened voice, trying to get through to him any way he could. I was wrong about you. Ingressus is gone. The Deathsinger is all that's left in you. No, The Deathsinger tried to collect himself, but Achillean's words pierced him in half. I didn't want this. All I ever wished was to have you back. The real you. I loved you more than anyone, Ingressus. Why must it end like this? Achillean fought to stay conscious while the Deathsinger's entire worldview was shattered in an instant. 1,000 revelations hit Ingressus all at once, and the songs finally let go of their hold on him. Ingressus looked down at Achillean's weary body, the scars from all their battles, and the wound on his chest that was draining him of his very life. Ingressus shakily exhaled and told so much truth in so few words. I'm a monster. I've taken everything from you. Even through the searing pain of his wound, relief swept over Achillean and turned his gaze to his brother once more while taking his last few breaths. I forgive you, Ingressus. I forgive you. the Tidesinger passed away in the Deathsinger's arms, his markings fading to black and the Protesium Primesong materialized beside his body. Ingressus still held Achillean, finally coming to terms with everything he'd done wrong. But despite it all, Achillean forgave him. And that only broke Ingressus even more. How could someone forgive the Deathsinger? He allowed himself to become a slave of the Primes. His soul was subservient to their every want and replaced Ingressus with the Deathsinger. Yet now, when they are right in front of him, Ingressus doesn't care. He lost something far more important, and he didn't even realize until it was too late. After giving Achillean a proper funeral and burying him in the north, the Deathsinger went to the nearby shrine to harness the Prime Songs. He finally has the power he sought for so long, but Ingressus didn't feel powerful. He wasn't happy that he finally achieved his goal. On the contrary, he couldn't stop thinking about Achillean and what it cost to get here. We're not rewriting Deathsinger, just adding a few things here and there so he can appropriately respond to everyone else's rewrites. Word spread of the Tidesinger's demise, and a memorial was held for his life and death in Kaltaria. When the news reached Zulius, he felt awful. He and Achillean had become very good friends, and after departing from him in anger, they never got to set things right. And they never would. Zulius feels terrible for acting so harshly and wishes he could take it all back, yet he still has to lead the Felden rebels against the enemies in Philora, so he carries on like Achillean would have wanted. In one meeting with Lucan, Nika, Masani, and a few others, Lucan insults Zulius for his lack of doing anything since the Tidesinger died, saying under his breath, "You're less helpful to us than the necromancers are to the Nether." And that's saying something. But his sarcastic comment made Zulius realize something important. The Tidesinger's plan from the beginning was never to defeat the necromancers. They were too unpredictable, given their powers over undead being completely unprecedented, and like nothing he'd ever seen before. Achillean knew the best way to destroy the necromancers without spilling unnecessary blood of his own comrades was through the Nether. Zulius uncovers what we've dubbed the Tidesinger's puzzle. Gallius' vast network of communications helped Achillean spy on the necromancers from afar during the war. With the help of dozens of spies, he was able to lay down the seeds of betrayal in the Necrolord's mind, and manipulated the already paranoid Ardoni into believing the Nether would overpower his faction. By the time Zulius figured everything out, the necromancers were already set on the path to betray the Nether, and now it was up to him to figure out how to take advantage of this situation. Zulius remembers all the subtle hints Achillean gave him, and despite their arguments, Achillean trusted Zulius to carry out his plans. Even in death, the Tidesinger cannot help but save the world. The Necrolord may have been smart, but the Tidesinger's cunning was leagues ahead of him. With the help of the locals, and after enlisting Alex's rebel team, Zulius leads the Felden resistance and prepares to strike. The necromancers begin to slaughter the Nether forces, and Zulius and the Felden resistance jump into action and strike at both warring factions. The liberation of Philora has begun, and it quickly became a three-way battle between the resistance, the Nether, and the necromancers. In the fight, Zulius and Masani encounter the Necrolord, while Lucan and Nika face off against Zarya. The Nether troops compose themselves from the surprise attack, and they start slaughtering both necromancers and resistance members alike. The battle is turning in the Nether's favor. Unlike the necromancers who are beginning to lose morale, the people of Felden refuse to back down. They never lose sight of what they're fighting for: their homes, their families, and their freedom. Instead of giving up and despairing, they keep up the fight. Zulius breaks away from his duel for a moment and manages to kill the Wither of Philora, and the people of Felden get a massive morale boost and begin fighting harder than before. Ordinary civilians start grabbing any weapons they can and join the fight. However, the duel between the Necrolord versus Zulius and Masani goes wrong. When Zulius left to kill the Wither, Masani had to fend off Zan Voltaris all on her own, but by the time Zulius returns, he sees Masani was killed, and it becomes a one-on-one between the two Ardoni. Zarya is eventually killed by Lucan and Nika, and with his death, the last of the necromancers are swiftly killed off. The duel between the Ardoni has moved up to the very tops of Philora, and Zulius finally disarms the Necrolord and knocks him to the floor. Just when Zulius is about to deliver the final blow, Zan utilizes a necromancer trick to distract Zulius and sneaks away, like a coward. Regardless of that, the battle down below came to an end as Alec killed the last Wither skeleton in the city. The battle was won with the necromancers, minus the Necrolord, being effectively wiped out, and all the Nether forces at Philora were destroyed. The rebels won a decisive victory with minor casualties, all thanks to Achillean's master plan, Zulius' leadership, Lucan and Nika's resistance group, and last but certainly not least, Masani's sacrifice. While Philora was liberated, the rest of Felden is still under the Nether's grasp, so Zulius and Alec lead various campaigns to free the entire kingdom from enemy control. Their successful uprising helped inspire the people in all the other kingdoms to fight back too. The Tidesinger's enduring faith in Zulius despite their quarrels saved Feldon, and Zulius realized Achillean's trust in his friends was what ultimately helped them win their battles. Zulius's purely pragmatic thinking is challenged by the late Tidesinger's perpetual faith, and it starts to change the way he thinks. Meanwhile, Herobrine hasn't been doing anything to help the knights following the Frostburn battle. The only mortal he wasn't cold to and actually respected was Achillean. He didn't care for anyone else's lives and left them almost on their own since the Tidesinger's death. Zulius, Alec, and a vast contingent of Feldon soldiers ride to Tartarus, where the other knights and factions of the rebellion amassed, and he sees Rhea acting as the new leader of the resistance after the Tidesinger placed her in charge at Frostburn. Unlike another second-in-command I know, Zulius wasn't mad that Rhea was the leader and not him. He knew she was trained by the Tidesinger and trusted Achillean's judgment. Zulius served as the leader of the Feldon rebel forces, so he helped Rhea adapt to suddenly being in charge of a continental resistance. Herobrine didn't show up to the meeting at Tartarus, but Zulius knew they would just have to continue on without him. All the remaining knights and representatives from every free territory united to end the war, marching towards Crown Peak and putting everything on the line for freedom. In the Battle of Crown Peak, Zulius helps lead the fight alongside Rhea. Just when the battle starts, a lightning bolt shook the ground, and Herobrine teleported in to aid them after watching the knights from the background since episode 5. He'd seen them continue to fight despite the loss of their two greatest fighters, himself and the Tidesinger. It confuses Herobrine, and when the Crown Peak battle begins, he decides they have finally earned his respect, and helps out the poor fools who never abandoned hope in their last fight. When things are looking good for the Alliance, a massive tremor shakes the battlefield, yet it wasn't the city that had been shaken. This tremor was felt throughout all the realms, caused by the imbalance Herobrine was seeking to prevent. A fight in the End Realm is occurring simultaneously, and in that battle, Queen Abigail was stabbed and fell on the brink of death. No one else knew what was about to happen except for Herobrine. The consequences of killing the last living beacon of the Ender Realm's power had never before been felt. Listen, we couldn't just foreshadow all this stuff with Herobrine and the realms getting out of balance, and then not almost have it happen. This has major consequences, and Herobrine is here to fulfill the purpose we gave him. Rips and tears in the sky begin to form in the overworld, looking similar to the edges of the portal Deathsinger used to harness the power of time. Without a moment to waste, Herobrine flew above the city, frantically closing the rips to delay the inevitable, the end of Ardonia. The balance of the realms is directly linked to the power of its warriors, and the End was losing all the power it had bestowed on the now dying Abigail, and it caused the realms to begin to collapse. The imbalance has genuine significance, and Herobrine exhausts 99% of his vessel's energy in this fight by sealing the tears and continuing to fight the Nether despite being nearly out of energy. Because of Herobrine's efforts and Vulcanus healing Abigail, the rips cease to appear, and Herobrine closes the last gaps left after they, along with the beacons, cause some strange effects including anti-gravity to come into play in the final battle briefly. As this was happening, one Ardoni of all 5 clans, Zulius, Senn, Rhea, Hubris, and Val, all power up and use their songs in a combined harmony to kill the last 2 Withers. The liberation of Crown Peak was a victory for the Alliance, and the rebels sent some forces to free the slaves of the Nether. Just as Herobrine thinks it's all over and is about to lift his sword to return to his dimension to recharge, King Pythus appears out of nowhere with his own reinforcements. They begin another fight against the small garrison left at Crown Peak. Herobrine could have chosen to selfishly save himself and leave the others to die, but he stays this time, determined to protect the world he worked so hard to deliver from certain doom, and he even tries out Achillean's self-sacrificing nature. However, his vessel is drained and weak, so he can barely hold on, yet he doesn't let that stop him as he, Zulius, Hubris, Senn, Rhea, Grek, and Grim all jump Pythus to try and kill him once and for all. In one quick moment of rest, Zulius notices Herobrine is barely hanging on and tells him they can do this, asking him to go. Herobrine looks at him, and Zulius' resolve convinces him, as he nods reluctantly and teleports away. He leaves the knights to destroy Pythus themselves, choosing to trust them like Achillean did. Zulius immediately jumps back into the fight, and all the main knights try everything in their power to end the Nether King. Grim is knocked out first as Pythus smashes him into the ground, and Pythus is about to finish Grim off, but Zulius saves him. And then Pythus knocks him out, swinging his axe in a wide angle, and Zulius barely blocks it, yet his staff is broken, and he's sent flying back. Zulius crashes right through a building and lands on the other side unconscious. And Pythus doesn't have time to finish off either Zulius or Grim before the remaining 4 knights keep attacking him. Grek gets stabbed in the side, and Hubris is killed. Yet when all seems lost for the knights, the Deathsinger swoops in and destroys Pythus, killing himself in the process and bringing the Second Great War to a decisive close. In the aftermath, the Ardoni decide to leave the Prime Songs in the hands of Herobrine, who's recovered from the battle and his vessel is back to its full power. The Primes would be safe in Herobrine's dimension, and they trusted his judgment to choose whether an Ardoni is worthy to wield them in the future should the need arise. He returns to his home with one final bolt of lightning, having helped save Ardonia and the realms from total ruin. Zulius' back got obliterated from the violent crash after his brief encounter with Pythis, and sadly he ends up with a limp. Rhea gave him the Tidesinger's double-sided staff since his was broken in the battle. Zulius used Achillean's staff to help him walk rather than to fight, as he would no longer be able to and resigned from the Knights of Ardonia. Even though Zulius retires and is no longer a warrior, he takes up the mantle of the next leader of Ataraxia, overseeing its reconstruction and keeping Gallius' original vision for the Haven alive. Zulius passes on the Tidesinger's morals and extraordinary faith to the younger Ardoni, using him as an example of not only a great leader, but also a great friend who trusted those he loved beyond belief. Herobrine and the Tidesinger are considered legendary figures in Ardonia, yet their script counterparts don't do them nearly enough justice to warrant such a status. We were also robbed of an interesting character arc for Zulius, since he dies shamelessly 2 episodes after being introduced. Giving these 3 characters more depth and allowing them to shine in their respective roles will help make their legendary statuses more earned, while also letting them have actual arcs. And of course, no good story is complete without the themes. The most obvious of the themes for these characters specifically is the idea of forgiveness and love through Achillean. His faith in Ingressus is tested all throughout the show, and he was the one person able to forgive the Deathsinger, and that is what compelled Ingressus to change his ways and overcome the corruption of the Primes. Achillean was able to forgive his enemy despite all the atrocious things he went through, and that takes so much more strength than simply killing him. Achillean basically had 3 options to choose from when he sacrificed his life in Frostburn. Option 1, escape the battle while also letting the Deathsinger live. Option 2, kill the Deathsinger and lose his brother forever. Or Option 3, let himself be killed and maybe, just maybe, bring his brother back. And of course, Achillean's selflessness made him choose the last option. The Tidesinger realized that both Achillean and Ingressus as individuals could no longer exist in the same world, so he chose Ingressus over himself. That Glacian unintentionally convinced him to try everything in his power to help Ingressus, choosing to gamble on whether or not there was still goodness left in him. Also, without his leadership and compassion, the war would have been lost. Sure, the Knights of Ardonia and eventually Ingressus helped free Ardonia in the end, yet if we remove Achillean from the equation, none of what happened would have been possible. Zulius also deserved far better than what he got. He was the only relevant Kaltaris, and the script did him dirty. In this rewrite, his arc starts when he's regretful from ignoring Thalius and trying to become like the next Thalius, but his pragmatism is challenged by Achillean's beliefs. He also mirrors Tygren, and his character isn't wasted. Zulius traveling to Felden also fixed the disconnect that arc had in the script, and he is what merges all the main story arcs in Season 3. We also know a lot of people wished Zulius survived, and I believe we did our green boy justice, even though he ends up with chronic back pain. And finally, Herobrine. There are so many problems with his inclusion in the original script, and we wanted to keep him in the story while also justifying his existence. Herobrine is the orchestrator of the canon events now, and doesn't just randomly appear whenever it's convenient. When he's there in this rewrite, you know there's a reason for it. Also, during his time of disappearances between late Season 3, Herobrine would be stalking the knights from the background, very similarly to the old YouTube videos where players were supposedly stalked by him. There'd be subtle nods to his creepypasta origins in this rewrite. However, they don't take precedence over his narrative purpose, a philosophy the original script didn't follow. He also gets something akin to a character arc by humbling himself enough to be prepared to sacrifice his vessel for the balance and the mortals in Ardonia after being impressed by their refusal to give up, no matter the odds. Word has it, the official Squared Media rewriting team has started working on the spin-offs, and even brainstorming for rewriting Seasons 2 and 3. We wish you luck if anyone on that team is watching, and we hope you liked some of our ideas. We planned this video to be way shorter than the last one, but judging by the length of it, it's probably not too much shorter, is it? While these guys aren't the main characters, Tidesinger and Herobrine definitely needed to be expanded on, and Zulius didn't need to be thrown in the garbage disposal so early on. Thank you all so much for the positive reception on the last rewrite video, and some talented people even made really cool fan arts and renders of it, and they deserve to be seen by more people. These 2 renders on screen right now were made by Confused Bro. And the next one is a little graphic, so you might want to skip ahead 10 seconds if you're sensitive to gore. Okay, 3, 2, 1. This one was made by CJ, and it looks awesome. Meowsomnia Singer drew this meme. And finally, Snake animated this.
This is Sparta!
We were not expecting to see fan arts, and they all look amazing. Shout out again to also Alex and Scribbled for helping in the writing department, and especially Alex because all the battles I talked about were 90% his ideas. I'd also like to shout out again Snake and Lucas for making great renders for us. This video was very much a group project, and it would not have been possible without those of you who helped, and all of you who watched until the very end. Thank you all for staying, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.